Hey guys, welcome back to Literary Gladiators. I'm Kaila. In case you guys haven't seen me around here before, it's been a while since I've done an individual video. So I thought today I would just pop on and give you guys something real simple. So I think that something most of us can agree on is that the only benefit of 2020 was that it was a really good reading year. I got more reading done than I think since like 2015. I think I read like 23 books last year, which was a pretty solid year for me. So I'm not going to give you guys a top 10 since I read 23. That would be kind of silly. That's literally talking to about half of the books I did, which just doesn't really make much sense. So I'm going to give you guys the top 5 books I read last year. So, coming in at number 5 is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. Sorry, the lighting is terrible. So this is the first in a trilogy, but the series as a whole it's massive. He's done a ton of books that kind of all take place in the same universe. He does the same thing that Stephen King does, where he kind of like lays Easter eggs in a bunch of his works that tie them all together, so that's really cool. It is an insanely long book. I think it comes out to over 1,200 pages. So delving into this is it's definitely a feat for sure. This is one of the best world building universes that I've ever encountered. I think Sanderson is well known for how well he builds and creates a world. And I think that this series really exemplifies that. The universe he thinks up and builds and puts you as the reader in is just phenomenal. It's so full and complete. Like, it is, there are no holes that you can find in it. It is so good. The one of the other things I really enjoyed about this are the characters. They're all very flawed but incredibly likable. I would have to say that this book probably held my favorite characters in a book that I read last year. They are all so interesting and compelling. There isn't a single, it's dry. It's a very dry book because it's very plot driven. It's kind of like Game of Thrones in that way, but there isn't a single moment where you're like, "Ugh, I don't want to read about this character anymore," because it does flip-flop between narratives a lot. So I think that is probably one of my favorite things about that. And then coming in at number 4 is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I think that V.E. Schwab had written like a children's series when we were kids. I want to say it had something to do with vampires, Vlad the Vampire, or something like that. And I feel like I had read a couple of those books, but this was my first adult fiction by her, and I really, really enjoyed it. I've been trying to branch out more into adult fiction in general, and I think this was a really good one because it combines the elements that I like about YA with more adult characters. Again, it's really fantastically world built. I think that's one of the most compelling things about that book too, is the characters are like, they're fine. I can't complain about any of them. But the world that Schwab has created in that book is really what draws me into it. It's I don't know if it would fall under more fantasy or science fiction. It's not heavy on either aspect. It's not like high science fiction or deep fantasy or anything like that. And it's definitely an urban setting, so that's cool. I would say it's like urban fantasy fiction, which I think is a pretty like niche genre. So if you're interested in reading something like that, definitely check that out. That's also the first in a trilogy, and I've heard really, really good things about the rest of the series as well. And then number 3 is the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. This was so fun to read. I cannot stress enough that this was one of the most fun books I've ever read. There is so much happening and so much flip-flopping back and forth and so much mystery and intrigue in it. There is not one single second that you know what is coming at you. It is so much fun. as a writer myself, the what I kept thinking about this the whole time while I was reading this was just this author must have worked so hard to put the pieces of this together to make them work the way they did. And I really think it pays off. I think that this is such an interesting read. I think that it is super unique. It's basically like a body swapping mystery. And I feel like there's quite frankly, there's just not enough of that. Don't we all want to be able to swap bodies? Like, it's just fun. It's a good time. And I think the twist ending is something that you will not see coming. It certainly wasn't something that I saw coming. So I think that one it's really good. I'm not usually a mystery person, but I thoroughly enjoyed that read. I thought it was really, really fun. And then my number 2 read of the year is the only one I don't have a copy of because I lent it out to somebody and haven't received it back yet. But that is Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. So growing up, I was a huge Hunger Games fan. I think it would honestly be considered my favorite series. I think I would even rank it a little bit above Harry Potter. I loved being able to delve back into that world. Obviously, like, going to Panem is never fun. It's full of violence and child murder and a bunch of other really horrible stuff that may never make it, like, a good time. But it's nice to be back somewhere where I enjoy being, you know? So I think that was really fun. If you guys enjoyed the Hunger Games, I think that it's fun to get back to that world. So when I had heard that Suzanne Collins was writing a book about President Snow, my biggest concern was I really don't care what she has to say about him. I don't want to sympathize with him. I do not want to end up feeling sorry for him or understanding where he's coming from or anything like that. And I can assure you that by reading this book, you will not. I would say that this is probably the first time that I've encountered a writer who wrote a super unlikable main character on purpose. I'm not just talking like they're annoying or anything like that. I'm talking like they are going to walk you through their thought process on some of the most screwed up decisions that they're ever going to make, and you're going to think, gosh, that's wrong. You're going to sit there and you're still going to say, I understand what you're doing and I deeply disagree with it. I do not think that you are on the right side here at all. And I think that was just a really interesting perspective to take. I think that very few novels do that. So I think that being given the opportunity to see from a villain's eyes and not side with the villain is something that we're all really missing. I mean, villains get redemption arcs in today's world all the time, and you end up, like, sympathizing with them, and you will not go into this sympathizing with President Snow, I assure you. I think that one of the other things she does really well is if you, like, look in the back of this book, there's a long discussion, like, interview with Suzanne Collins about, like, her inspiration and stuff behind this, and she talks a lot about how she's read a lot of philosophies and stuff on human nature and what drives us and what drives war. And I think that comes across pretty deeply in this novel. It is definitely more on the philosophical side, I guess. It's very introspective and why are we the way we are and what makes us do the things we do and what drives us to make those decisions. So I definitely think that this is a little bit more adult than the Hunger Games. I think it's potentially even darker than the Hunger Games, and I think that's saying something considering that the Hunger Games gets pretty dark towards the end of it. And I think that it's only made more so because you're getting this, like, first-hand perspective of those terrible decisions being made. So I really enjoyed it. Enough about that, I guess. And then my number 1 book of the year was The Testaments by Margaret Atwood, which is the follow-up for Handmaid's Tale, which, I mean, I honestly think that even without having read The Handmaid's Tale, you could probably go into this and still enjoy it, as long as you have, like, a vague background on what happens. I think this is a really satisfying conclusion to the story of Gilead. even though I don't necessarily think that you needed to add on to it. Like, when I found out that she was writing this follow-up to it, I was kind of like, do we need that, though? Like, I feel like The Handmaid's Tale is so complete on its own that we don't need to go back and revisit it or clear things up, because I think it was pretty clear on its own. But I think she did a really amazing job revisiting that world in a way that doesn't rescind on anything that happens in the first one, or take away any value of what happens in the first one. I think that this one is just as poignant as the first one. I think that it is just as meaningful and heartfelt and, quite frankly, scary as the first one is. I did find this one to be a little bit easier to read just based on the formatting of it. I think that this one is a little bit, like, clearer and a little bit less, like, metaphorical than the first one is, I guess. I find that the first one was a little bit dry and dull. I don't think this one was at all. And I think that one of the most interesting things about this is the character she chooses to tell this story through. So, it flip-flops between three different characters, and all three of them have very differing perspectives on Gilead, what it means to be from Gilead, and whether or not Gilead is good. And I think that by drawing on those three different perspectives, you get this really complete story. And I think that it's interesting to see all of those perspectives come together as a whole and where that journey takes them. This one definitely has like it's a little bit more lighthearted. I feel like there was one scene in there that made me like stop and put down the book, and I had to come back to it like a few days later. Some of it is very heavy, but I think that overall this one has a much more lighthearted and hopeful tone than the first one did. The first one is so grim and unsettling. I do think that this one is a little bit lighter, and it definitely ends on a more hopeful note, so that's pretty exciting. One of my favorite things about this was Aunt Lydia. If you guys read the first one or you watched the show at all, I'm a big fan of both. Aunt Lydia, her character gets even more compelling in this book. I think that Atwood does a phenomenal job of fleshing out her character and really letting it shine, and just like giving you a really unique perspective on her and who she is. That was my favorite part of this, was watching Aunt Lydia's journey through this whole thing. So yeah, those are my top 5 books that I read in 2020. If anybody has any good recommendations for what I should read in 2021, please leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to us if you haven't already. Comment, like, rate, review all of our videos. For those of you who don't know, I do also run a podcast called Drunk in the Library, where me and my best friend get drunk and talk about weird history. We talk about the books that we're reading, weird news, stuff like that. So please go ahead and check that out as well. We're available on pretty much every platform. And then least and most importantly is, if you enjoy what we do, if you want to see more of us, please consider supporting us on Patreon. It's really important for the show so we can bring you better and more frequent content. And until we see you again, keep reading.